I was really fascinated by this idea of the power of one and the power of many. And if you're not in this room and you're watching this on a video, that is the theme today. That's what all of these speakers are talking about in some way. That's the common thread throughout. And that really relates to the story that I've had the privilege of living over the last 8 years. And to jump right into that, in 2006, I wrote a story about a friend. She was a brand new friend, and she was struggling with drug addiction, with depression, with self-injury, and had attempted suicide more than once. And 2006 was kind of the dawn of social media, the dawn of MySpace, and I ended up posting this story on MySpace as a blog and gave it its own page, and just shared a little bit about the journey that my friend had known and her struggles and her life, kind of what led to this place and kind of what led to this life of abuse and depression and addiction. And specifically, she was denied entry into a treatment center in Orlando and ended up spending the next 5 days with my friends and I. And so I wrote this short story reflecting on our conversations and reflecting on our time together. And so this thing, it started as small as it could. It started as one story. It started, even more importantly, as an attempt to help one person. And perhaps the way those two interact is the idea of a few of us believing that we could shape a better ending to her story. Her story was in a really difficult, dark place when we met her, and we were hopeful that maybe she could buy into the possibility of healing and sobriety. And so we spent that time leading up to her entering treatment, and I had this life-changing privilege of sharing that story. And then we began to watch it take on a life of its own. And we literally got to see the best of the internet, the best of social media, and we got to watch this story make its way around the world. And we began to hear from people, at first anything outside of Florida, where I grew up, where our team is based today, where I still live today. Any message or question or confession that came from outside of Florida was super exciting to us. And after a couple weeks, it was Australia and England and Canada and places we'd never been, places they don't even primarily speak English. And so we were just, scratching our heads in amazement. There was no language that was asking for stories or asking for questions. And yet people began to open up, and people just began to say, hey, the story that you told, the story that you wrote, the story of this girl, this sounds a lot like my story. Or this is the story of my dad or my girlfriend or a classmate or a cousin. We heard from people who had lost a loved one to suicide, and they talked about what it was to live with that pain. We heard from people who struggled with depression, and maybe they were comfortable using that word. They talked about the day-to-day struggle. Maybe it's difficult to get out of bed in the morning. Maybe that's something they said. Or it's tough to fall asleep at night, or it's rare to finish a meal. Or my mom just keeps asking why I don't smile like I used to. And so we heard these kinds of things, people just sharing and opening up about what their struggle looked like. We heard from many people who wrote in on behalf of loved ones and said, there's somebody I know, there's somebody I care about, there's somebody I'm concerned about, I want to help them, but I don't know how. There's somebody I love, and I'm afraid that I'm losing them. And when I try to help, when I try to give advice, I feel like I'm actually pushing them away, and I don't know what to do. And so these questions continued to come, these stories, these confessions, and we began to do the homework to be able to point people in good directions, to be able to point to other resources, to point to professional help, treatment, counseling, crisis hotlines, suicide hotlines. And then we also, I think, equally pointed to this idea of community and this idea that as people, we need other people. And I don't know if I revealed the new title of my talk, but basically I thought about kind of splitting the difference and landing on the most politically correct title. If today's topic is the power of one, the power of many, the title for this moment, this talk, is the power of few. And I'll unpack that in the next couple minutes. But community is maybe not indicated by the number of Facebook friends, right? You can have hundreds, you could even have thousands of Facebook friends, and yet it doesn't necessarily indicate that anyone really knows you, that anyone gets to meet you in your pain, meet you in your questions, your uncertainties, the places you feel haunted, the moments that you feel stuck in. It's not indicated by a smartphone that's overflowing with contacts. It seems to be this other thing that we really have to choose to have honest conversations, to let people meet us in those difficult places and to let people meet us beyond the status updates, right? Beyond the tweets and the pictures and the stuff that we're proud of, kind of the life that we construct for the public. It's another thing, a very vulnerable thing, to let a few people in. And yet along the way, we have been celebrated. We've gone on to win awards. We won $1 million a couple years back. Just all these, who would have thought, surprising moments. We've heard from now more than 200,000 individuals in terms of the messages we've responded to. Those messages have come in from more than 100 different countries, and so the other end of the spectrum, we've now touched on the masses. We've now tapped into that, and we get to live in that surprise, and we get to become this source of hope and encouragement and resources for people around the world. It's literally a dream come true that I get to do a job like this. And so some people say, hey, you guys have done it. You've created this online community. And essentially what they're saying is you've given a hopeful home to the masses, to all these people. And there's some truth when people suggest that. I understand what they're getting at. I think they're saying that you've allowed people to feel less alone. You've allowed people to find encouragement in the words that you guys write, in the words of other people. And we kind of push back at that, and I think maybe surprise some people, because there's an irony to what we actually believe about that. Online utopia is not our goal or our dream. And so the irony is this. The irony is that a big part of our message is telling people, hey, you need to turn off your computer, you need to put down your phone, and you need to let somebody know you. You need to have a conversation over coffee or over a meal or wherever it takes place, but you need to be honest with someone. You need to let somebody see your questions and your pain and your struggles, and maybe they don't make the perfect speech or know the thing to say, but maybe you begin to journey through it together. There's times, there's moments when we feel really stuck and we need more than just the advice or the words of a friend. And so that's a time we point to professionals, and we love the stories we hear, the progress and the healing when someone chooses to sit with a counselor or when someone chooses to step into treatment. And that as a result of these conversations, they begin to let go of things they didn't know if they ever could. They begin to feel less alone in some places that they've felt truly alone in, maybe for years. And so I think we keep coming back to this idea of a life with a few people. And I wonder if you have that. And so I think for me, even standing up here as someone who struggles with depression, I think I'm aware that either of these two extremes can be dangerous. If I'm alone, if my pain only plays out in my head and in the context of a story that just involves me, that's a really dangerous place to live. We've learned that most people who need help, they never get it. 2 out of 3 people who struggle with depression, they never get help for it. It points to the isolation, it points to the shame that this is a very lonely story for way too many people. You connect the dot to learn that untreated depression is the leading cause of suicide. And there's roughly 20 million of us in America alone who struggle with depression. And so it points to the isolation and the danger of a story that's just about one person. And I think the flip side of that is this idea of, what if we worry about everyone? What if we want everyone to love us? We want everyone to accept us and appreciate us, to want us, to name us, to validate us. And even for me, along this really surprising journey as my life has changed, being a part of this work, there's been that temptation, the desire to get invited to every cool event, to speak at every cool conference and every cool college, and it's easy to get lost in either place. It's easy to get lost just completely alone, and it's easy to get lost just trying to please everyone. And I think the further I get down this road, and maybe the older I get in life, the more my dreams become simple, and the more there's just this desire to live life with a few people, to have a few characters that are let into my story, and I get the privilege of being let into their story. And we try to live this out and kind of figure this out together. And I'm a basketball fan. I imagine there's a few of you in the room, and I was blown away, as a lot of people were, by Kevin Durant's MVP acceptance speech a few days ago. And it really got the attention of certainly the sports world and even beyond that. And the thing that shocked me was he was given kind of the highest honor in terms of an individual award. Basketball is a team sport. He plays on a team. He plays for the Oklahoma City Thunder. They're in the middle of the playoffs, and so as a team, they're trying to walk that road toward winning a championship. And in the midst of that, he was given this, incredible individual honor. And he chose to accept the award with his entire team on the stage. And in his speech, he basically shared his story. And he didn't talk about his place in history. He didn't talk about his legacy. He didn't name drop Michael Jordan. He didn't mention LeBron. He talked about where he came from. He talked about the role and the love of his mother. And he went on to name every single guy on his team, every single teammate. The guys that play a few minutes a night, the guys that don't play at all, the guys that probably won't be on the team next year. Named every one of these guys, celebrated every one of these guys. And I kind of sat back and just got the feeling he was saying, this is my story. Like, this is my real story. Not the impressive one, not the public one. This isn't just about me. These are the people, these are the characters in my story. And I wonder if you have that. And I've come to believe I don't think we have a lot of control of attention. I think we all want to live a story that matters. We all want to live a story that's impressive. And yet we don't have a lot of control of how our work is validated or known and by how many people it's known. It's fun to fantasize and imagine the Kevin Durant MVP moment that certainly most of us won't experience something like that. But I think we get to experience this idea of having some characters in our story. And it seems like every good story has that. Every good story has a few characters that are trying to figure something out, that are trying to journey through something, work through something, overcome something. And there may be a couple exceptions. Castaway would be one. Wilson is the asterisk because he's the volleyball who we all fall in love with, even though he's a volleyball. I've made him a male volleyball. But even then, another one more recently was a Robert Redford movie, All Is Lost. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe he's the only person we see throughout the film. And yet I think in both of those stories, the stories are greatly impacted by the reality that these people who are completely alone are driven to stay alive by the memory and the need and the love they have for other people, for the characters in their story, even when we don't see them. And this idea that these other people, the love that they share, this actually is what makes their life worth fighting for. And so I wonder if you have that. I wonder if you feel that. It's our belief that you deserve that. You deserve some other people who step in and remind you that your story is not only worth living, but worth fighting for. If you want to think about this idea of suicide as maybe someone choosing to give up on their story, we believe there's such a need, that it's such a powerful thing that we need people who can step in and fight for us, fight for our story when we think about giving up. When we get to that place where it seems like a possibility to let the pain win. People who remind us that we deserve to be loved, we deserve to be healthy, we deserve whatever help that we need. I hope you have that. I hope I have that. Thank you.